Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. The series here is dedicated to an LS conversion on a 1976 Corvette. It's a local customer of mine. To kind of go back over what I probably said in previous videos, he was tired of the old engine, wanted to do an LS swap, and I've got the engine back here from the machine shop. One of the beauties of these LSs, if they're not abused and they're maintained on a regular basis, these are long-lasting engines. On this block here, this is an LS1 5.7 liter LS1 aluminum block with cast iron sleeves. These things here, they hold up so well. What we ended up doing was just cleaning the block, installing new cam bearings, and on the cylinders, I just ran a ball hone through them. I did personally. I checked the cylinders for taper and for wear, and there was hardly any wear at all, and the taper was almost nil. Like I said, these things really last. Now, I know when I bought this engine, it was advertised to have 89,000 miles on it. But after tearing it apart, to me, it looked like it had 189,000 miles on it due to the fact that there was so much old, crusty oil in there. Now, that could just be from the owner of the Z28 that this came out of, using not the greatest oil, maybe waiting too long between oil changes. But even at that, when you tore this thing apart, you would think, man, this thing is a mess. And if this was a small block Chevy, and you tore it apart and saw all the crud and caked up stuff inside this thing, on a small block Chevy, you know the cylinders would have had a really big ridge at the top, major taper, a lot of wear. They would have needed to be bored. On this thing here, absolutely gorgeous once it was cleaned down. And now what I'm going to do is take this and start shoving all these pieces in it. Everything we have is over here. There's a couple boxes on the ground over there. There is the 4L60E transmission on a stand behind the GTO, and I'll be doing that once we finish putting this together. All those transmission parts are sitting up here, just waiting for me to get to it. This is all the old stuff that came out of that transmission. I will be putting this together once we get that engine together. But like I said, I'm going to go ahead this morning, start putting all the pieces in this, do the assembly, get this back together, do the transmission, get that back together, drop it in the car. We've already had this thing in the car. I did my mock-up. It fits in the car great. It's almost as if this engine, this setup was meant to be in the car, the way things line up. And that is a credit to the aftermarket. The stuff they sell now to do these conversions, the motor mounts, as you can see down here, these adjustable motor mount plates, I even have some extra spacers in there. As you can see, I needed to bring the engine up a little bit higher. I just didn't like where the pan was sitting, and you may see that on some conversions when you look under the car. Even with the Holley retrofit pan, which is, to my knowledge, is the most shallow pan they make for an LS. Even with that, and I think that pan's sitting here somewhere. I don't know where I put it. Anyway, even with that, it just kind of hung a little bit lower in the car, and you don't want an oil pan hanging down so low that if you hit something in the road, it's going to punch a hole in it. We don't want a hole in our oil pan. So on this thing here, I decided to push it up a little bit more. That's why there's spacers behind the engine mounts. Both sides I have spacers. It lifted the engine up. I've got plenty of hood clearance still. Everything's been checked. It's going to work out great. And it's a lot closer to where the original small block Chevy was in this Corvette. But just the way everything else lines up, the cross member, everything the aftermarket is now making for these cars really makes conversions a lot easier. Even as far as once you get into the engine management system, There's so many different systems out there. You can go with a stock standalone harness and a factory computer, and you just need some HP tuner software to get into it, and you can make it run in anything. And that's kind of what we did in this Chevy pickup over here. That is sitting on a 2003, I believe, or 4 Chevy SSR platform. The full platform. They just took the body off of the platform. We purchased that for the customer and put it on top. I went into it with the HP tuners, eliminated the vats, took out all the emissions and a couple other things, turned the key, and it fired right up. So there's a ton of options available for doing LS conversions. So it's just a matter of doing some research, finding what is best for your application, and going with it. I don't want to drag this on forever. Like I said, today I'm going to be taking all these parts in these boxes, everything over here. I've got some new parts, there's some old parts sitting on here. But everything here and over there is all going to go into here. The cylinder heads are sitting over on the side. I'll go grab the crank here. We're going to put the bearings in first. Actually, excuse me, backtrack. We're going to be doing the pistons first. And then we're going to go ahead and get the bearings in, put the crank in, move forward, slide the pistons down, lock them up. You guys that are doing these conversions, remember this. When it comes to the rod bolts, you can only use factory rod bolts a couple times at the most before you should replace them. This engine has never been apart before, so I'm confident that using the factory rod bolts is going to be fine. Had this engine been apart once before, I would probably err on the side of caution and put new rod bolts in. But since this has never been apart except this time here, we're going to be fine. So keep that in mind, guys, when you're doing these LS conversions. Most of these fasteners, if not all of them, are torque to yield. Once you do that to a fastener, you can no longer do it again because that fastener has now been stretched to its max limit, and they don't normally return. They won't have the same clamping force, and they'll break, and you don't want to throw a rod through the side of your engine. So anyways, we're going to get on with the show here. I'm going to go ahead, and I got to find the pistons first. I think they're sitting up. There they are right there. The box right there, cleaned and ready to install. In that box are all the pistons. Got to put the rings on them. And like I said, I'll get all that set up. We'll get the crank in it. We'll start sliding the pistons down in. A little bit of assembly lube here and there. See if we can get this thing into a long block by the end of the day. I'll update it all with videos. Keep you guys posted. Again, as always, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, questions, comments, anything. We will see you soon, guys.